2021 council work session this evening. This is one we've been doing a lot of work in preparation for through our level 10s and our EOS process, and it's the start for our goal setting, which will be coming later down the road. But with that being said, Claudia, would you like to do a roll call for the record?
Yes. Councilor Geary?
Whoa, first up, I'm here!
Councilor Menke?
Here!
Councilor Chenoweth?
You're
Just
muted.
on mute.
Chris, you're muted.
Yeah, I had to move from screen 1 to screen 4. Sorry. I'm just here.
Councilor Peralta?
Here.
Council President Drapkin?
Here.
And Mayor Hill?
Here. And we might do a, maybe, Claudia, if you could just text Adam just to let him know that we're starting. So with that, again, you guys have been, if you're like me, working on some of that homework, and we've taken a little bit of detours and some of those types of things. But I'll tell you, I'm excited to have our consultant, former city councilor, Wendy Stassens, with us. And so, Wendy, I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I'm going to go ahead. I did do a slideshow some slides, but we're really going to do a lot more talking than listening. Oh, you guys are going to be talking more than I'm talking during this session. That's why you guys need your pens and pencils. But so what we did, first of all, I want to thank everybody. I had some great feedback from you guys on the homework, and so you guys know this is for you. This is not something that we have set in stone, and so we're very responsive to the feedback we're getting. I think it's going to make the process way better as a result of all of the feedback you guys gave us on what we've done so far. So what we're doing today, instead of trying to move forward as quickly as we were before, today we're trying to respond to some of that feedback, give you guys more context, and then also do some practice of like how you would be processing some of that information. And out of this session tonight, we're going to narrow down some of the work that you're going to do, refine the homework. So I'm going to go over what we're going to do tonight. So the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to introduce you to the updated goal setting based on this updated schedule. So the pivot that we made, we're going to get just quick feedback, maybe 2 minutes from everybody who wants to provide feedback to the rest of the city council. I got some amazing feedback directly from you guys. Anything that you want to provide more additional feedback or even more context to what takeaways you had from the homework we've done so far. And then we're going to get an update from Jeff regarding work that staff has done that might give you guys some context that will help you guys in the homework between this session and the next work session. We're going to talk about some big picture stuff. So shared vision, an understanding of the gap between the shared vision and where we are today, which will then inform our 2021 goal setting work. So it kind of puts it in context of what we're trying to solve with these priorities. And we'll do that together. And those three underneath it are part of that big picture. So the alignment on vision exercise, the gap analysis exercise, and then the dot exercise with Susan is going to be something you guys will do after the meeting. It's not a huge project, but it is one that will inform our revision of the homework. And then we'll go through at least one of the priorities, and we'll talk about questions that you guys had, and we'll talk together about how we might analyze that. So maybe you guys have a better understanding, or we'll have more input from other counselors about how they're approaching the homework, and it might make it, even though it's going to be pared down, kind of prepare you better to be able to do that work and feel comfortable with it. So unless there are any questions, we'll go ahead and get started with that agenda. Any questions?
I just wanted to state that Councilor Garvin has joined the meeting.
Great.
Welcome, Adam.
Okay, so the new updated plan, I showed you guys this at the first work session. We added an additional work session, so will be extended out by a work session, which is fine. I think we're going to get a better result as a result of doing that. So we already did the kickoff meeting. In this work session 2, we're going to be talking about context and support around homework, and we're going to be working on narrowing the scope of the work that we need to do to get to goals from that strategic plan. And then after this work session, the EOS advisory team is going to refine and resend the homework. You guys should have more time to do it, and we're going to refine it based on your feedback. We're also going to narrow down the categories out of the work in this session. So I think it will be a more reasonable lift for you guys and produce a better result. And then the third work session will be converting those top priorities into measurables. So the goal is we're trying to get to where we have it narrowed down enough to do that work to make them actual measurables that can be tracked through the scorecard system. And then after that session, we're going to then put together a plan for a proposed plan for SMART goals and how we're going to track them for 2021. You guys will review it and give us feedback. We'll revise that, and then you'll have approval in the 5th work session, which these two should be more about giving feedback on a prepared document out of your work to date. And work session 5 really should just be approval because we've gotten your feedback, made revisions based on your feedback. So any questions on that revised plan? No? Okay. Can everybody see the slides okay?
No, they're not up, Wendy.
Oh my gosh. Okay, hold on, share screen. Can you see them?
You've got takeaway from homework right now.
Okay, here we go. So you didn't miss much on the first couple slides. So this was the what we're going to do today, the agenda. So the introduction of the updated goal setting plan, the round robin takeaways, update from Jeff, big picture of shared vision, gap analysis to inform the goal setting. And these 3 are those, what we'll go over in the big picture. And then spreadsheet work to make sure that you guys can get any questions answered and have what you need to feel comfortable doing a modified version of the homework. I apologize about that. I didn't see that it wasn't shared. And then this is, again, the modified goal setting plan. So work session 1 we've already done. We're in work session 2. Between work session 2 and work session 3, we're going to do advisory team refinement on the homework. Work session 3 will be making them measurable. And work session 4 will be reviewing a white paper proposal of both the goals that can't come out of work session 3 and a plan for how we're going to implement them, with how we're going to utilize scorecards to hold ourselves accountable to them. And then work session 5 will just be basically out of the feedback you give us, we'll revise that plan. And then we will present a plan that will either have final approval or more feedback. And as we go through these, if we need to extend it by other sessions, we can. I think the most important thing is that we're learning a lot through this process, and that we get, in the end, we have goals that we feel like really address what they need to address, so that we can then learn how to track ourselves and hold ourselves accountable to those goals over the course of the year. So now, anybody have questions on this slide? Sorry about that. Nope, I can't see everybody. Okay, so. Okay, so takeaways from the homework. I thought we could go around and take a couple minutes, just, it can be anything, just to share any thoughts that you guys had after taking on that task. Who does let me call on somebody. I'll call on Zach first. Zach, do you want to share some of your takeaways from doing the homework? Just a couple minutes, high-level thoughts on that.
Yeah. Okay. I just kind of have a page of notes here, and I guess I could just go through them. I don't know what the order or rhyme or reason is, but I just kind of read through it, and as words jumped out, actually, I kind of did this, and it ended up lining up with your sort of prompt questions a little bit anyway, but I sort of ad-libbed and just kind of wrote down things that jump out at me as I read through words, right? So vision, when it comes to collaborative, right, we're working together, and to me that's not individualistic, right? There's a way to describe it, and there's a way to describe it by what it's not, and I think that individualism is not there in the production of results, right? Working together, not individualistically to produce results. Is what I see as collaboration. Also sort of understanding that our actions have meanings and ramifications to who we're working with, right? And so we may feel passionate and strong that one way is right, but we're not in a vacuum. We're in, big pond, and what we do has big ripple effects and cascades out. We need to be thoughtful of those things and take those into account in our decision making, either if we're working however collaboratively we're working. And one thing I wrote down was in collaboration and thoughtful discourse. It was when I was involved in the City Club, was talking to someone about what City Club was, right? And was describing it. And so we come and think and talk and share ideas and experiences. And so the way they summed it up was, it sounds like a safe place to change your mind. And I know that has maybe a little bit different connotations in a political environment, but I really enjoyed that, right? You're safe enough to think through things and maybe change your mind on something. I think I was wrong. I think I'm moving forward to something, or I'm learning more. Tell me more about that. I want to understand that better, or I think the way that it stuck out to me was a safe place to change your mind, right? It's collaboration. Caring was another word that came up, and to me, empathy is huge in that, right? It applies some understanding and taking the time to think, analyze, and process the full depth and breadth of our actions, reaching far out and trying to look at ourselves and our actions from the viewpoint of others. Inspiring, building a sense of service and purpose, and perhaps even pride, right? We're inspiring those around us and with our actions, and sort of leading from the front and behind in our work. Exceptional was one that jumped out at me, and I wrote down not settling for lowest common denominator, right? Not stopping when we think, continuing to go on and make sure that we're doing exceptional work, and it's not stopping at that lowest common denominator. Livability and quality of life, I think I got wrapped around the axle on, so I think that might be part of our discussion, but I wrote, it's a place that has support structures for those in need, a place where we take care of everyone in their own way. We create it's safe in ways that break through sort of maybe classist thought, right? It's safe in unconventional ways. In our mission statement, again, I kind of spent most of my time around that livability, livable word, and wrote down a few things there. A livable community is financially strong and resilient. It's built to human scale, which makes a strong sense of place. Built to human scale, strong sense of place. Offers and fosters connection and mixing, not isolation, right? So we create public spaces for connection and mixing of ages and values and races and everything, creeds, and not isolating people. Offers housing stock in all ranges, and has safe streets for all modes of transportation, and just safe pathways for all people. Our values, stewardship, we're financial stability, I wrote down, and sort of ensure sustainable methods for our operations, for our service delivery models, for our actual environment, and we're being good stewards of the earth. equity. We want, and that I wrote down one that I always come back to is assume good intent, right? That people are, when we have discussions that people are coming, I'm assuming good intent from whatever discussion we're having from the other side or all sides. I wrote down all are welcome in our tent. It's just kind of my phrasing for equity. And that we never can stop. That's a never-ending effort to always be changing our thinking and adapting and understanding the new challenges that people face. Courage, just planning for change. I really spent some time thinking about it. And, accountability, responsive service. Responsive service and information ones I put down for accountability that I wanted to maybe spend some time diving into in the discussion just to see what people thought of when they read responsive service and how we're delivering and giving information and making sure we're doing that for the public. So
Great.
it kind of took me through that sheet.
Great. So one of the things, I think that's awesome. I actually took copious notes of your insights on that. We're actually going to go deeper into this a little later in the meeting. So that's great. You have a jump start on that. Did you have any feedback on on the homework itself and on tackling that spreadsheet that you tackled? Anything that you want to leave us with on that? We'll build on what you just started with us in the vision section of this meeting, which is great. Anything else you want to share about the homework itself?
You mean actually answer the question, dummy?
No, I didn't mean it like that.
So the actual spreadsheet?
Yeah. So just going through it, takeaways, it was.
Yeah, like we talked about, I'm halfway through it. It was startling to think how different the world is 2 years later. What was super important to us then that made the list isn't important now, but some things in the context of now looking back, it's 2 years feels like, oh my gosh. So there seems that there's some glaring misses. Why are we not talking about this in this work plan? And I know we created a document so we could stay focused on the document, and that's going to last forever because that was what was important to the community at the time. And I don't disagree with that, but there were some things that are high on my list and that were not included. Otherwise, it was nothing big jumped out. I think it was pretty just slow and tedious to work through and make sure that we're getting good data, but nothing big jumped out other than, just that initial takeaway of, man, the world seems drastically different in 2 years. So
yeah, great feedback. Okay, you're next on my screen. Do you want to weigh in on some of your thoughts? Thank you, Zach. That was great.
Sure. Thank you, Wendy. So, as you know, and as the mayor knows, I definitely struggled with this homework assignment and on a lot of different levels. And I don't know if part of it is just because of the way that my brain works, that this was the spreadsheet, the physical spreadsheet to work from was very challenging for me with the formatting of it. And so it was very laborious. I spent many hours on it. I did not complete it. But then there were also some other parts of it that were more philosophical that were challenging for me. One was that I felt like this was a really unfair assignment for our newest counselor, Chris. I felt like, he had no opportunity to, even though he's been attending council meetings regularly, he really wouldn't have the basis to know what staff has or hasn't accomplished or where we are with particular goals. So to give this lofty of an assignment right off the bat felt weighted a little bit unfairly in that realm. And then I also struggled with it in the sense that like many of us, my council assignments are I don't take lightly, and I do a tremendous amount of work on my council assignments. So to suddenly have to integrate, if I had completed the homework, which I did not, I think if I had completed it, it probably would have taken me somewhere between 8 to 10 hours of unexpected work in a week. And so, philosophically, I really struggled with it. I don't struggle at all philosophically with the idea of working through the strategic plan and pulling out our top priorities for the year ahead so that we can give staff good and clear direction and work together as a body, as a greater body to achieve those goals, both at the council level, but also working with our department heads and understanding where we should be bringing those priorities into our committee assignments. I did enjoy the prompt to reread the strategic plan, and as it so happens, by the nature of the spreadsheet of pulling the strategic plan across into a spreadsheet, and then because of the multiple columns, really reading it and rereading it and rereading it and rereading it. And so I did appreciate the opportunity to refamiliarize myself with the strategic plan in preparation for goal setting. And I'm really thankful that you all heard the feedback from me and from other counselors and are bringing this here today in this format where we can discuss and work on a slightly different tack at narrowing down those 160 line items into something that's a little bit more manageable. The other thing is that, what I noticed with and I put this both in the spreadsheet and in my email to you, but one of the things that I noticed is, that many of these priority actions that are in the strategic plan, these are really things that should be viewed more as defining the culture of how the city of McMinnville works. And I don't know how exactly we recategorize or organize that, but over and over again, I saw line items, for instance, strategically work with regional partners. Well, that, to me, that doesn't really need to be part of the strategic plan, but it is important that it is embedded somehow in our culture that we are a city that likes to work with partners, work across all sorts of, from business partners, other organizations, nonprofit, for-profit, other cities, higher levels of government. Not all organizations do that. So I want to, in some way, memorialize that it is our intent to operate in that way. And with that as just one example of something that I saw over and over again, I almost feel like those things could come entirely out of the strategic plan because it belongs somewhere else. I'm not exactly sure where to put it. But not as a specific goal. I'm just referring back to my notes really quickly. I also thought that any of the goals that were listed that had some sort of training attached to them, and there were a variety of them, that clearly, without us deciding whether or not they're achievable or measurable, they just are. And so really we could take everything that had anything to do with training and we could put it out on its own and we could say, what's the timeline on this training and who all does it apply to? And then work that back in to the overall plan. And then kind of as Zach said, with the difference in times, I mean, any plan like this, and this year, as we all know, has accentuated this more than any in recent history, is that, you know, the document needs to be flexible enough to be responsive if it is going to actually serve in its intended function. And so I think part of doing that, part of making it that sort of document is that it's narrow enough that it allows you to take on an individual goal and then investigate what that means for that goal, given the circumstances of the world, which we're just all, I think, much more cued into right now, that best laid plans. So those are kind of my, those are the thoughts I'd like to share right now. Thank you.
Awesome. Great. Thank you so much, Remy. That was excellent. That was very helpful. Okay. Kellie, do you want to share some of your takeaways from the homework? Oh, Kellie, you're muted, Kellie. Okay, there we go.
Okay. Well, my compliments to Remy and Zach. I thought you both had some really good thoughts on this. I did not actually do this alone per se. Scott and I met for the first one just to go through column D. I'm talking strictly about the spreadsheet at this point in time. And we got so confused after about the first dozen that we decided we need to bring Wendy in, and God bless her, she finally caught up with us on Sunday, and we spent close to an hour, I don't know, at least an hour, maybe a little bit longer, talking about it. And sadly, I did not do anything in the interim, so I probably should have been looking more closely at the strategic plan. But what we determined was that a tremendous number of those were not really action items or not data-driven type of items. In fact, probably column D should be no for about half of them. I noticed particularly in the sections where we were dealing with economic development, very specific things there. And I apologize, Scott, if I'm stealing any of your thunder here, because we've talked about this a lot. Some of those were specific enough that I felt like they were action items, and some of the things were actually already done. And there was a tremendous amount of stuff that I didn't have any idea where we were at with it. I think I worked on it all totaled about 6 hours. I did finish it, but I feel very incomplete about the whole thing. And actually, I think I would welcome an opportunity to go back and kind of review. I reviewed a little bit, but I really review what I did and think about it a little bit more. But I don't think I want to look at all of the items. I really would appreciate some winnowing down tonight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Great. Thank you, Kellie. Okay, who's next? Let's see. Can't see everyone. Hold on a second. Chris, you're next in line. Do you want to give us some of the feedback? I know you have some for us.
Okay, so apologize there. I guess I'm gonna end up repeating several things. One thing I'd like to know is while we're doing this takeaway or this input, would it be possible to take the screen share away?
Oh, of course, yeah.
So I can see everybody.
Yeah, there you go.
Because I'd love to see at least those that are willing to let me see. I'd love to see facial reactions. It helps me to understand where people are coming from.
Perfect.
So as a business owner, I look at things from a perspective of the words Kellie used are action items. They're things that are quantifiable, goals that you can actually take a look at and say, yes, this is, I can identify what the goal is, and then I can identify when I've completed the goal. And so when I'm reading a potential goal, it's got to be attainable, right? You don't want to set a goal out there that's just virtually impossible to attain. It's got to be something that's within grasp. It's measurable. And when I was reading through these, all I kept thinking to myself was, God bless our leadership in McMinnville, who was tasked with trying to do that very thing when this was handed to them. And I don't mean that as a disrespect to the process of creating it or negative to anybody that was involved in making it. But there's so much of this, there is just no way to pin. It was very subjective wording. And then on top of that, trying to come up with some measurable way of evaluating it, I couldn't fathom. And I actually have been doing some of my meetings with some of the department heads, and so I actually asked at least one department head, what's your response to this specific item? Just to hear what he would have to say. And I won't name him. And his reaction to it was similar to mine. It was like, this is not something that's within my purview, yet it was within his purview. Very difficult for somebody to complete a goal when it's not attainable, not definable, and not in their purview. So I guess for me, in reading through this, I'd like to find a way to, it all sounds really good. But sounds and applicable are two different things. And finding a way to bring this in, to rein it in such a way that we're actually defining things so that Mr. Towery, our manager, can actually implement it, I think we need to put some work into that. My second takeaway in meetings in general, and why I wanted to go to a screen where I could see faces, is I think we need more interaction with each other to understand where everybody's coming from, and we're not getting that. COVID's part of the problem. It's not the entire problem, but COVID's definitely part of the problem. And I want to be able to see where people are coming from, where their reactions are. Thank you, Councilor Garvin. I really want to see. I want to know. I don't know where people are coming from that I'm going to be working with to help to figure out where our goals are at if I can't get interaction with them. So that was kind of the second thing that I felt in this, is this thing would be much better to do in a group setting than me sitting at home in front of my monitor, pounding my head against the screen, trying to figure out what it all means. So that was kind of the second takeaway. The third takeaway happened today. Thank you very much, Council President Garvin, for pointing out how I use the words unfair, and I tell my kids never use the words unfair because life is unfair. You just got to get over it. But it was unfair to dump this on me as I'm coming in as a city councilor. And there's so much of this that there's no way for me to know. And I want to be helpful. I want to serve, but I can't serve if I don't know. Yes.
I did ask this when we were talking about it in the first session, and I felt very sorry for you. And the only reason I finished it is I thought, well, doggone it, Chris is not going to be able to answer these, so maybe I'm going to be a dummy too.
You did, and yes, thank you very much, Councilor Menke. You did make a comment, what if Chris doesn't know anything about this? And at the time I thought kind of I think I know more than that. And then I started reading this. Anyways.
I'm just ignorant, of what is actually, what it's supposed to mean. God knows some of it.
And then my last piece, actually I got a fourth point. My last point, and I mentioned this to Wendy when I talked to you, is I really want to hear from staff or from I don't know if I should be calling him Jeff or Mr. Towery. But I really would like to hear from them what they're receiving and what they're seeing when they read this. I want to get an appreciation for what we are dumping onto them and how they're able to process it and utilize it, so that I can understand what they need from me that will help them do what we want them to do. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. I'm talking with my hands, sorry. I think that's it. I've tied up a bunch of time. Thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you. That's very, very helpful feedback on that. Okay, so Adam, Scott, or Sal, you guys are the last city councilors and mayor. Do you guys want to give us your takeaways?
I'd be
Sal?
glad to give it a lash
Sure.
if now's an appropriate time.
Yep.
So, first of all, I really appreciated this exercise. I definitely didn't have as much time as I would have preferred to spend on it, but I would like to just make a couple of observations about the spreadsheet and then a couple of observations about the strategic plan. With regard to the spreadsheet, I think I'm not going to repeat a lot of the things that the other counselors said. I did agree with a lot of the comments that were made, but what I saw was a mix of things that are priorities that seemed more philosophical rather than actionable. And I remember that Kellie actually pointed that out as we were developing the strategic plan, that she had concerns that this was less of a plan than it was kind of a philosophical and direction setting document. And so to the extent that there were priorities that are not specifically actionable, you know, maybe, and also just kind of calling back to what Remy was saying, maybe there's some things that we can pull out that sort of articulate a philosophical bent that would sort of drive a direction, but don't necessarily articulate a specific goal or policy outcome. And then there was a list of things in there, and especially in the economic development area, but in general, there was also a bunch of things in there that were actionable, that seem to have a level of granularity that would require a level of expertise that I don't think it, you know, it's not a question of Chris being new to the city council. I think that a lot of those things that were in there required a level of subject matter expertise and familiarity with the project, because the words that were in there had a very specific meaning to somebody that related directly, I think, to their job. And I think that's kind of a reflection of the fact that the role that the staff played in helping to contribute to develop the plan. So where I kind of come down is maybe if we could end up with something that separates out the philosophy from the actual priorities, and the items that are really granular and specific, if some of those are actually things that staff members put forward to, or community partners like Visit McMinnville or the Economic Development, MEDP, you know, it'd be good to get that into this document, because that would kind of help bring the stakeholders together. Because a lot of these things, like particularly with the economic development section, some of those things didn't seem exactly squarely in our wheelhouse or in the wheelhouse of our staff. And so, you know, that being the case, that's an area where we'd be bringing in partnerships. And to the point, particularly with the economic development stuff, a lot of those things, I don't know what the status is of that. And I think Kellie mentioned that as well. Then, excuse me, I'm just trying to transition screens here to the, if we can go back to like go to somebody else. I just have a few thoughts about our strategic plan, but I have to pull it up and I'm not on the right screen. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, of course. Adam or Scott, do you guys want to jump in and give some of your thoughts, and then we'll go back to Sal later?
I'll go very quickly. I'm a stable analytic, and there was too much data. And so you couldn't come to any conclusions. And if your mind is a stable analytic, if you're an accountant or a banker or a business person, sometimes it just starts the wheels turning and it goes into overload. And I had to call Kellie and I says, you know, let's work on this together. Two collective minds are better than one, and two collective minds weren't better than three, so we reached out to Wendy. And it was even very difficult to determine whether things were measurable. See, that was the thing that was difficult to me. And so I'll just very quickly, you know, my takeaway is, you know, this is the first time we've had a strategic plan as a city. This is the 17th year that Kellie and I have gone through a goal-setting process. And so we've been through this process many times. But since we've received the strategic plan, I think the input from the community is driving our values as a council. And so we feel like we have to be holding to our community, where in reality, that is only input coming to us. We still need to set policy and procedures. And so, Wendy and I spent some time this morning talking about this visioning process that we'll be going about a little later. I'm pretty excited about that. We're not going to start over, but we're going to refine the process, and we're going to take ownership as a council to give directions. I raise my hand and I salute every department head that has been working on what we put in front of them for 2 years. And most of them have picked up and done some phenomenal things. I think Sal made mention of this, and I know Kellie made mention of it. When we get down and look at economic prosperity, that whole thing was very measurable. They were very specific goals, but they were beyond the council. And I think it was very specific because we had that economic advisory committee that really delved in and did some really good things. And with the leadership of Heather, they got very specific. I think that's beyond the council. We've given the go-ahead, and those are implementable things that need to happen at a department place. And so that's why you see probably 60 measurable things there, because they really work that out. And that makes this document really unwieldy and really hard to keep in our head. And there's been many times I've asked us to go back and say, what's the vision, what's the mission, and what's the values? And we don't know. It's such a large document. So I think this process is going to help us refine that and get back to a process that is able to keep in our head. And somebody said that I think it was Zach that says our elevator speech, what is our value? What is our mission? What is our vision that we're doing? And that we can articulate that, because I can tell you right now, I don't know that there's one of us that can articulate these 60 pages or whatever that is. So I'll just leave it at that.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That was great. Great feedback. Adam or Sal, you guys want to give your input?
Yeah, overwhelming would be one word to describe the assignment. How the mayor captured everybody else's comments, I would second most of that. Just looking for, action items that we can be held accountable to. You go through 160 line items in a spreadsheet, and I would say over half of them are more philosophical than things that we can assign and be held accountable to or hold staff accountable to. So I would really like to get down to, some bullet points and pull a couple things out of each one of those areas and have it be real defined, and that we can look back on quarterly and hold Jeff accountable to, and he can hold his staff accountable to, and that we can move forward as a city and not just have this overwhelming document that is more words than action.
Yeah. Great.
And I did not get through this, for the record.
Understandable. Great. Thank you, Adam. Sal, do you want to give us your feedback on the strategic plan?
Sure, just really quickly, I just had a couple of thoughts. I found my spot. So looking at the vision, the mission, values, and priorities specifically from that, I thought the vision and the mission are fine. I mean, I think that it's a good articulation of who we aspire to be as a city. The values with regard to stewardship, equity, courage, accountability, there again, I think it's fine, but I feel like if we have those kinds of things, that we don't really need to say them. And the section that I thought was really helpful in terms of coming up with measurables, and it's been helpful for me since these started to be added to the staff reports, and it's something that I really appreciated about that last visioning process, is that they add all of these priorities that pertain to things that come to council, that these are included as part of the staff reports, because I think that one of the things that we need to do as we winnow is you have criteria for evaluating what's important to us to review. And so having those kind of categories and boxes that we can check for how does this fit in with our priorities, this new idea or whatever it is, that I think that's really helpful. And I think we should definitely keep that. And I think we should try and apply that to these other kind of frameworks. And that's the main thing I have from that. Thank you.
Great. Awesome. Well, I just want to thank you guys so all the work you did is definitely already, I think we have more clarity around what the strategic plan is. And one of the things that I said to a number of you when I was talking to you about your concerns about the homework is that this is part of the council actually taking this strategic plan and deciding how to use it and how not to use it, right? So it's a document that is what it is. And the step that we've been missing is like taking it and having the city council decide how it does and doesn't help us to set policy direction, right? So this is the beginning of doing that, right? We need to process that document, decide how, I've been saying, extract the gold, and then have it inform our work going forward. And part of that might be identifying gaps, might be identifying failures in the document that aren't useful and deciding that those aren't going to be part of what is going to inform policy. So the fact that it's overwhelming, the fact that we're understanding that it's vague, I think is all great takeaways. And then we will change the homework to make it more attainable for us to be able to make those conclusions as we're setting those very specific goals for 2021. So great takeaways. I really appreciate all the work that you guys did and being willing to give us that feedback. And even though it was longer than 2 minutes, it was worth it for me. So I hope it was worth it for you guys too, to hear what everybody had to say, because I had some great conversations and I didn't really want to keep that to myself because I wanted you guys to hear it too. So, okay, so next, Councilor Chenoweth, we heard your feedback. Jeff is going to give us some context. And in addition to what Jeff tells us tonight, we're also going to give you some printed material that will help you to have context as well. So I'm going to turn it over to Jeff. And Jeff, all this says is that I'm going to turn it over to you now. Do you want me to stop screen share and give you the floor? Oops, you're on mute, Jeff.
Oops. That'd be great, Wendy. Thank you. I've got some slides and some documents on my other screen. I'm really going to talk from them as opposed to share them with you. A lot of them are things you have seen in the past, and if you need to see it again, we'll make it available. I sort of wanted to start with some higher level staff goals, but particularly based on some of the latter comments about the plan, I wanted to say that this is a classic example of an elephant that we're trying to eat. And I think we've finally gotten to the point where we realize we can only eat a bite at a time. The mission, vision, values, and goals are really the high-level policy issues. And I think one of the things Sal said was just bang on. I mean, if you get to that point, and we did through about a year plus of community engagement and council engagement, that sort of stuff just sort of becomes part of how you talk about the organization, and we don't necessarily have to pound that into people time and time and time again. And I think you'll notice that over the last couple of years, you're seeing those slides that I used to start with every time we talked about the plan sort of get more lean and less prominent in the presentation. And that's because I think you get the mission, vision, value, and goals, and maybe a gentle reminder or I ought to go read that again is all you really need. You don't really have to see it every single time. The objectives that are in the plan, that's sort of the bridge between your policy direction and the work we do as staff delivering the product. And the priority actions, frankly, are all staff work. They're things that you are all interested in because you should be interested in them. They're things that you hear about from your constituents and people from around the community and your peers in other cities. But if we spend all of your time talking about those priority actions, we won't ever get sort of the clear policy level direction that we're looking for from you. That's really where you, as directly elected citizens in the community, add that great value, is to make sure that the actions that we're pursuing at the staff level really are translating into impact at a policy level. And so while we spend a lot of time talking with you about the priority actions, if we can get your sense of the objectives as the sort of the bridge between the high level sort of aspirational statements and where the work happens on the ground, that's a huge value add to us. It makes it a lot easier for us to feel confident that we're delivering what you want and what you need and what the community wants and needs. That said, one of our goals through this whole process has been to not just get work done, that's part of it, but just to make sure that we're providing you the information and support you need to be successful as policymakers, to be able to report the right information to you and the community about our progress, and to be able to talk about when we finish things, when we're struggling with things, and what the next steps are as we move through things. The other issue that's really important that we've kind of been hammering on the last couple of years is how to set priorities in a way that not everything is the most important thing, or that everything is ranked A1, because there really are, as you saw, as you're trying to pound through this spreadsheet, we all have capacity limits, whether it's experience or knowledge or the press of other duties, and just making sure that we're realistic in how we set our expectations for both you as policymakers and us as staff is really important, and that's part of what we're going to be working our way through. So with that as sort of preliminary, we did refine your focus just about 2 years ago on 9 of the priority action items, and we brought those 9 back to you just under a year ago and did a report. It was essentially a work session PowerPoint slideshow from me where we talked about the goals, we talked about the specific objectives, we gave you the status of the existing objective and what the kind of next steps were. Most of them weren't actually at the point where they were completed, they were just underway. It is interesting that a couple of things that were on the list, one was related to something that may ring a bell. The goal was creating diverse housing opportunities that support great neighborhoods. The objective was assess the urban growth boundaries adjustment. The status was this work is underway. Staff is evaluating the need and working with legal counsel and city council to determine the next steps, and the next steps were to be determined. It was the shortest slide of the bunch, and guess what? It sucked up hundreds of staff hours and dozens of council hours over the last year. And let me find the right spreadsheet. And when we asked Heather to do some homework, it's can it be measured? Yes, it can. By when it's done. Is it done? It's done. And so we think we can cross that off your list of 9 top priorities. Now there's still work to do with respect to the UGB because it's in the hands of the state. There's an objection. We don't know what's next. We're going to find out what's next in the next 120 days. But it sort of has graduated while you're still likely to provide some policy level direction at some point. It may simply be next steps towards implementation, or we may have to address some issues that we hear from the state. But that has become more of a sort of a management objective at this point, where we'll keep you informed and we'll ask your direction when we need it. But it really isn't at the point where it has to be a council priority anymore. That's what it looks like to me. And so we have done some of this homework as well and have, just a couple of examples. One of the challenges, and a couple of you mentioned this, is some of these priority action items, even though they're sort of simple to describe, they're not necessarily easy to measure or to measure the impact. These sort of either start and finish or you're done. Other projects are more open to being measured and to being described in that way. One of the other things that we've always said about the strategic plan is that the priority action items were never intended to be the be-all and the end-all of the strategic plan. They were our best assessment at the time of the high priority near-term actions that we could take to move towards implementing this plan over the next 15 years. And that's the other thing to remember. It's named MacTown 2032 for a reason. We think we're going to be work on it until then. And as a result of having that clear mission, vision, values, and goal structure, when the pandemic hit last year, we pivoted in some really interesting ways. And one great example that is in the homework is a discussion of what we did with municipal court. We didn't have a lot of muni court projects in the strategic plan as priority action items, but when we realized that we weren't going to be able to meet with people face to face for who knows how long, and now it's run on to 10 months or so, we basically created a virtual court. And I don't know this for a fact, but I think we were one of the first virtual muni courts in the state. And I know from at least the sort of anecdotal observations on our lists for city managers, we're one of the longest operating virtual municipal courts. And when things shut down again most recently, we didn't skip a beat because we've still been operating in a virtual court setting. We've been getting the work done. Well, we didn't forecast that 2 years ago when the strategic plan was created, but the strategic plan provided that policy direction, that clarity of vision that allowed us to pivot and do that work when it became necessary to do it. And so with those sort of couple of examples about how we've handled things that we anticipated in the plan originally and how we've handled some things that have come up since then, I'm going to stop talking and let Wendy get you back on the agenda. I'm certainly happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Sure. Do any counselors have questions of Jeff before we go on to the next step? Thank you, Jeff. Very, very good, thorough update for us.
Yeah, at a different time, I would love a follow-up on the efficiency of Muni Court Virtual.
We'd be happy to put something together for the council. We've actually got a work session tentatively scheduled where we're going to bring the key court staff and the judge before the council and talk through some of the things that we've done and some of the things that we'd like to do with the court in the future. So I don't know if we've got a date certain for that, but that's scheduled to come to you sometime in the next couple of months.
Hey, Remy, if you hit Lafayette Avenue at about 90 miles an hour on the way home, you can find out how it works pretty fast.
Firsthand.
From home, Zach. I almost entirely work from home now. I'll try.
That's funny. Okay, any other questions for Jeff?
Well, now I have a question. Is that the voice of experience, Councilor Gary?
You're going to be a marked man.
You're breaking up. Can't hear you.
Oh, that's funny. Okay, all right. So we will go on. Thanks again. Go ahead.
I do have a quick question. Sure. So, Jeff, you heard from multiple of us that we were reading through this and we found it to be something that would be very difficult in a lot of the points to identify a way to measure whether or not you've completed the objective or not. Is that the same feeling you have as the person who received this and is trying to implement it?
So I will tell you that I have been involved in a variety of strategic plans over the course of my career. Some are better than others. There are things about this one that I like a lot. One of the single biggest challenges, I think they fall into two categories. One is that priority setting. How do you decide what really is most important and what comes and what goes when you add priorities to the list? I haven't found yet a strategic plan that sort of seamlessly helps you transition to priority setting, either at the staff level or at the council level. So that's something we're all kind of learning together. And the second is what you measure and how you report success. That is always a challenge. And so we're working that all the time and trying to do it in a way that makes sense, and also trying to do it in a way that we don't create sort of a bureaucratic infrastructure that's all about data and performance measures and management, when what we're really trying to do is deliver service to the community. So we haven't figured it out yet. We're still efforting.
Thank you.
Awesome. Any other questions? Okay. Great. So I will go back to the slides. Can everybody see my slides?
Yep.
Great. Perfect. Okay, so the next step in our process is, this is the part that is really kind of the meat of what we're going to do today, which is really, this picture really shows an overview of what we're trying to do. We're trying to take a step back and say, really, when you're trying to create clarity in any group, the first thing you do is you clearly identify in the group, in the team, the organization, the leadership, you make sure that everybody has a shared vision of where we're trying to get to. So that's this, in this slide, that's this vision part, the desired future. And while we may be individually thinking about it, we haven't done a lot of work recently to make sure that we have shared our thoughts about that, and that we're really making sure that that vision is what's informing our work and decisions, right? So the next step after you work on having a shared vision is that you identify where we are currently and what's in this gap. So in this gap is where you should be, what should inform what goals you should have, right? Because the most important thing for us to work on are the biggest things that are causing the gap between where we want to go and where we are now. And so in these exercises today, what we're going to try to do is we're going to start with the vision. And that is one thing the strategic plan has done, is, as you guys have talked about, is it has provided a mission, vision, values. And what they have found with organizations is really the most important thing around having that team that produces exceptional results is one of the most important things is like in the Good to Great books, they found that it isn't what is in the vision necessarily, it's whether you have alignment around a shared vision. Like, for example, in Good to Great, they had companies that had core values that were all over the map, totally different, nothing shared at all. And really the most important part was that cohesion around whatever their core values were. And so that part of it, just having them isn't enough. It's really making it to where the leadership, the body really has internalized and aligned around that vision. So I'm going to hand it over to Scott. Scott is going to do an exercise with us to really start working on having you guys internalize the mission, vision, values in a way that you can talk about it amongst yourselves. And then we can really work on getting a clear vision of what future what are we working on in these goals? What future are we trying to get to? So to create that cohesion in the leadership team so that we can work to get there. So Scott, I'm going to hand it over to you. There's not much on this slide. Do you want me to stop share?
Yeah, let's stop share and get the everyone up. Again, everyone, thank you, Wendy, for taking us to this point, and thank everyone for your diligence in the process that we've been going through. You know, we talked this evening quite a bit about the strategic plan, and you know, the piece that I really enjoy about the strategic plan is the vision, the mission, and the values. And I also like the strategic priorities. Not that we haven't had vision, mission before, but until we got this strategic plan, we never used those in the goal setting process. The goal setting process is we took every 4 years we had a citizen survey that gave us some of the directions that our citizens wanted to go. We had a consultant that came in and talked to each of the counselors and talked about what were their priorities. So we took individual priorities, and then she narrowed that down, and then we had an evening where we just got together, and then the next day we came and she gave us those priorities, and then we worked through that as a council and as staff, and then we came up with 10 very discrete, directional, measurable items, and we move forward. This process that we've been going over for the last 2 years has the foundation to doing what we need to do. And so as Wendy indicated, any organization needs to have an alignment of a shared vision to provide the direction and the collaboration among the group. You know, we need to build a habit around our vision. Our thoughts, when we're trying to go directions, has to go back to that vision. And I think that little cartoon that Wendy had up there is very appropriate. Where are we, and where are our aspirations or our vision? The vision needs to be relevant, and the process needs to be measurable, and we need to have a scorecard attached to it so we can track success. It needs to be internalized. And we need to internalize that governing elements of the mission, the vision, and the values. And I truly enjoyed what Zach said to start out. We need to create a safe place so that we can change our mind. If COVID comes back or comes around, and we weren't in a safe place that Jeff said we need to address this, and as a council we address this, we would have missed the mark. And so we've got to be able to feel that this is a safe place to have dialogue and to possibly change our mind of where we're going, because time goes on, things come before us in a different way. So we're going to do a little bit of an exercise of alignment of our shared vision as a council. And okay, this is going to be weird, but I want you to close your eyes. Okay, close your eyes, and I'm going to read to you the mission, or the vision, the mission, and the values. And as you close your eyes, I want you to be thinking about a couple of things. We're going to take about after I read this to you, we're going to take about 5 minutes to internalize our vision. Write down on a piece of paper, what does our city look like in the desired future? What does it look like? What does it feel like? And how does it function? And I want you just to race down and write all kinds of descriptive things that you think our community ought to look like. And we're going to put those down, as many as you can, and then we're going to share that among one another. This is a visioning technique or an exercise that gets us outside of the very specific words, and the vision is a collaboration and caring city, inspiring an exceptional quality of life. Well, what is that? And I want you to be thinking about that. So again, close your eyes, and I'm going to read slowly the vision, the mission, and values. The mission of the city of McMinnville: a collaborative and caring city, inspiring an exceptional quality of life. The mission of the city of McMinnville: the city of McMinnville delivers high-quality services in collaboration with partners for a prosperous, safe, and livable community. Values: number 1, stewardship. We are responsible caretakers of a shared public assets and resources. We do this to preserve the strong sense of community pride, which is a McMinnville trademark. Equity: we are a compassionate and welcoming community for all. Different points of view will be respected, but not all members of our community are equally able to access our services or participate in public process. We commit ourselves to lowering these barriers. Courage: we are future-oriented, proactively embracing and planning for change that is for the good of our community and consistent with our values. And number 4, accountability: we believe healthy civil discord is fostered through responsive service, clear, accurate, and useful information. So go ahead and open your eyes, and we're going to track for 5 minutes what you see in your mind McMinnville being in the future.
Robots. Automated cars. Cars on every car. Retired zip lines, shows.
We have about 2 minutes. We have 30 seconds.
What is the original? Little jeopardy there. Really? Check out.
Okay, the time is up.
Time's up. We checked out. Check back in.
What we would like to do now is have you share with the group what your vision is in real terms I don't know that they have to be measurable, but when you think of what the desired future is for McMinnville, what does it look like for you? And I always start at the top of the screen, but I'm going to start at the bottom of the screen this time. And so, Sal, would you be willing to share with the group what your vision of the desired future of McMinnville looks like?
Sure, Mayor. Thank you. So in the future, I see a city that has worked to qualitatively improve the quality of life in our community. We've done a better job of spending public safety money to effectively address some of the diseases of despair that are affecting our community: addiction, mental illness, criminal conduct. We've taken stronger steps to improve the natural environment in McMinnville and partnered with entities to expand the local and regional opportunities that we have, and as well as taking affirmative steps to protect natural habitat within the city, and figured out how to get housing built for people that live here as opposed to people who move here. That's as far as I got, Mayor. So,
thank you, Sal. Let's move over to Remy. Would you go next?
Absolutely, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. Quite aligned with Councilor Peralta. I wrote that we invest not only in our parks, but also in our partners like Ecology, McMinnville Water and Light, and Zero Waste to be a civic leader in terms of environmentalism, and that we do that in a way that demonstrates a return on investments for local businesses and be a business-friendly city. And that we work with our other partners like MEDP and the MDA to invite industry into our town, and industry specifically that brings with it living wage jobs, especially in the aftermath of COVID and what could prove to be quite debilitating for our city. I wrote that we push forward in striving for housing equity and, again, find partners. I do believe a lot of the work we have to do lies in creating strong partnerships regionally, and so that we find partners that are willing to do the hard work and also have the stamina to create more equitable housing opportunities. And then, while this is not a specific, this isn't measurable, I do think it's important that we as a city be the friendly city that we historically have been, and that we demonstrate through our leadership the type of city that we want to be.
Thank you, Remy. Adam, could you go next? You're on mute, Adam. Thank you.
So I started out with just a statement initially: a sustainable, diverse, and inclusive community that is safe, affordable, and provides economic opportunity for its residents and neighbors. What I envision McMinnville being is not a bedroom community to Metro, and not a commuter community to, Salem and Portland, which I know there is a vast amount of people that have to commute to those areas currently to provide for their families. So, we get there by being a business-friendly city that empowers opportunity for family wage jobs, not just living wage jobs, and looking for public and private partnerships that we can leverage and bring quality of life to our citizens, but realizing that we as a city can't be everything to everybody. And so when we can leverage the private sector to fill those gaps, and we can really hone in and focus on what our core services are, I think that's what really stood out for me in the strategic plan, is that I was excited when we went through the strategic plan that we were going to identify our core services, and I was hoping we'd really zero in on that. And I still feel that we as a city are trying to be everything to everybody.
Thank you,
Thank
Adam.
you.
Zach, you're next.
Okay. Thank you. I'll try and actually answer the question this time. So the spreadsheet, no, I'm just kidding. So what did I get? I got McMinnville is a thriving, culturally significant, has a thriving, culturally significant downtown 3rd Street that also encompasses 2nd and 4th Street, has expanded to 2nd and 4th Street, replete with a diverse and thriving local small business economy. It encourages and empowers locals to pioneer their own way and make meaningful change and impact to their city in the way that they see. You know, to shape their future of their town that they're going to live in, right? That's their future. McMinnville is their town. New parks and open spaces with safe bike ped access and connectivity that can circumnavigate town and achieve access to all services. Ooh, man, this shorthand is brutal. Mental health is recognized and accurately treated for what it is. On courage, I wrote, we honor the past and prior legacy without giving in to toxic nostalgia in our decision-making process, and it requires a commitment of our future selves now to recognize that in the future. We continue to lead in sustainability and environmentalism as true stewards of our people and the planet. That all future McMinnvillians have a place at the table and a choice and options of how and where to live and access to services, and all are welcome in our tent. Last but not leastly, we have a cool new LEED certified natatorium, which is a pool.
Thank you, Zach. Let's go over to Chris. Chris?
I will get faster at turning off my mute button, I promise. You would think as a tech I could get to that a tad bit quicker. First was a statement. I see McMinnville as a place where we have a mixture of environments that provide opportunity for those of varying socioeconomic status to experience the same view of this community that we have already come to have. In order to accomplish this, I think we need policies that encourage the relocation or the innovation of new businesses into our community. I think it has been an area that we have has traditionally had problems with, and we need to have ways to bring more business and more high-wage jobs into McMinnville that will sustain the current cost of living in McMinnville. I'd like to see, when I look kind of in my dream pocket of what I'd like to see McMinnville do going forward, some of that does not involve us. We may have a voice in it. We may be encouraging it, but I think Adam already kind of said it in a way. I'm going to say it a little differently. But I'd like to see our community utilize our private partnerships to innovate solutions for the drug addicted, for the mentally ill. I think I'd love to see, not for recognition to the city, but just for recognition to solving the problem. Help us working with those that might be able to find solutions, long-term solutions for those affecting and in those kinds of circumstances. And I think probably if I put my biggest view on what I'd like to see McMinnville be, this last election cycle broke my heart. One of the candidates that ran in this last election cycle has sold their home and moved out of here. That should never be. And I'd like to see us be the beginning of the healing. The beginning of the ending of the division and the bringing of us. We talk about inclusivity. We talk about wanting to bring everybody together. I'd like to see us quit talking about it. So my view of McMinnville is a place where they quit talking about ending the division and actually did it.
Thank you, Chris. Let's go over to Kellie. You're off mute. Good.
Scott knows I hate doing these things. So thank you so much for letting me do this. I don't know. I feel kind of like, I'm not sure I was really on the plane with everybody else. Well, I go back to Zach's definition of collaborative, and I loved it. I think it's the whole concept of accepting and working together, and when a decision is made, we go with it. And whether we necessarily all agree, at least we can understand how the decision was made. We want a place to live that provides equity and opportunity for us and our children, where our children can grow up and have opportunities in this town without necessarily leaving it to achieve their goals and other than a temporary absence, like they can actually get a decent job here, a living wage job, and they can find housing. Stewardship to me is key. We all have to be good stewards of our resources, but we need to be generous and to share our abilities and finances to the greater good and charity to others. And that means partnerships and working together. And it means bringing people in, businesses and stuff that are willing to perhaps support job, workforce housing and things like that. Courage is important. We cannot meet the future without accepting the challenge of change. And we as a city want to provide safety, opportunity in all things.
Thank you, Kellie. I must have closed my eyes a little too hard because I think in pictures, and so I don't articulate the same way that you guys did of going down through the vision, mission, and values. I just saw big picture items, and if you would allow me, I'm going just to, again, talk, and some of these are just one-word descriptive words that I see our city in the future. I see it as livable. I see parks that are green and robust. I see a robust and a dynamic downtown. I see a diverse economy within our community. Transportation, roads, bikes, walking, all drivable, being able to get to where we want to go. I see city employees that are engaged, a place that people that work for the city want to come and live. I see Mac Water and Light, resources abundant at low cost. I see affordable housing. I see DEI. I see safe. I see community gathering together for concerts, art, and connectedness. I see fiscally being balanced and being wise with our assets and taking care of our assets. I see that the city is approachable. We listen, we engage our citizens. We, again, come back and are approachable. This is a clean place, it's a resourceful place, and it's sustainable. We have a pride of ownership. We're friendly. We have great neighbors, and we have great neighborhoods. Again, I say we need to be able to walk and have fun visiting our assets, such as the library, the pools, the parks. I even think we ought to be able to visit the police department with our kids and the fire department, and we need to have a strong recreation program. I see education being the highest and best that you can be found, both secondary and our colleges and universities. I want those who work here to be able to live here and to be able to be a part of the community. I see medical services that provide services to us and let us stay within our community. I want retail availability so we don't have to go outside of our community to buy what we want. I want to see innovation in our industry, and many of you have talked about that. I talk about tourism and I say, I'd like to see us 24/7. And what I mean is that we work in the downtown during the week and then tourism comes in on the weekend. And so we have a downtown and we have an economic basis 24/7. Continue with our food, our beverage, and our activities. A world-class air museum and facilities there. A profitable airport. I see superior services, and I see one of the best communities in the West. And lastly, a caring community. So that was me. So now what I'd like to do is give anyone an opportunity, now that you've heard others and thought, are there any other comments that you might have on your vision of what McMinnville is with its desired future? Anyone be wanting to address anything that they overlooked? Remy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to all my co-councilors as well for the thoughtfulness in which you approach that. Historically, in our goal-setting sessions, there was some time that we spent on team building, which I see integrated into this process that we're doing right now. Definitely a more challenging thing to do over Zoom and not in the same room. And as Councilor Chenoweth mentioned at the beginning, the disconnect when you don't have the ability to read body language and so forth. And even if you're using your screen, still can be challenging, right? There's still, you don't really know, there's so much that we are able to read and vibe from one another. But I'm saying this because, I heard a lot of similarities all the way through, which I think is wonderful. And I want to quickly, but I think importantly, touch upon something that came up. Mayor, you mentioned a community that is caring, and that was something that was important to me as well, and I heard it other times. And then I specifically want to just take this opportunity. I'm a little uncomfortable, so that's why I'm procrastinating what I'm trying to say, because I'm trying to come up with the right words. But the tenor of the election cycle came up, and I guess what I would like to say is that in my time on this council and preceding this on Planning Commission, we wonderfully worked as a nonpartisan body. Honestly, I may have guessed, but I really did not know anybody's individual political leanings, because there was never a place for it on council. And I feel as though what kind of happened beyond our control is because the national dialogue was so heated that a lot of partisanship was thrust upon our local elections in a way that was really inappropriate, because it's not germane to the work that we're doing. The policy, the decisions that are happening at a national level are so vastly different than the policy decisions that we're making here. And I'm bringing it up again because, or I'm bringing it up right now, or restating this now, because I really think it's important as we move forward that we again forget whatever assumptions we may have made about individual political leanings, and we don't allow that to be something that separates us. We are strongest as a unified body. We have worked not always to the liking of the public, but we have worked together to do that. And I really hope that moving forward, we can continue working in a very unified way, and that again we demonstrate that unification and that equity through our leadership, in that we are all encompassing and value each other's opinions equally. I didn't know, I thought I would probably have this as an individual conversation with all of you, but thank you for opening that door, Chris, and I look forward to these next years on City Council. I look forward to them being enjoyable and stimulating work in which we're working to address the issues that address our city.
Thank you, Remy.
Hey, well said, Remy.
And any other comments anyone would like to share before we move on to the next portion?
I got one that I noticed was missing off the list, and I may have continued to vision while others were sharing their vision. And one thing that I think is important and is access to high-speed internet. And I don't know how a fancy esoteric way to vision that out, but I think that's super important. As the world moves past me into an advancing digital age, that's a utility. And everybody, as we talk about equity and something that touches and allows people to move through society, that's super important. And as stewards of that public access, we should be considering that in our thought process. And that should be, the future of McMinnville should be highly connective on the data waves or whatever those are.
We've come up with, there's been a lot of conversations about the fiber optic backbone. The problem is we're waiting for the 5G to come in with enough antennas to carry the data load. Until I think we can do that, we're going to have to deal with the internet we've got. But it's certainly a possibility for the future.
Yeah, I just think I didn't hear anyone put it in their vision, and I think that should be in.
No, you're right, it should be.
Yeah.
And Zach, to your point, I think it's more of a norm today because we're working and we're going to school all over the internet, but we need to have it better and we need to have more and better access.
Right. I know the county put a big push on that, and we were sort of left in the wind with COVID, right? And people working from home and kids at home doing school. Yeah. Can you do this? And, it was sort of a shove off the cliff moment. I think we could have been better prepared for that.
Absolutely. Any other comments to the group before we move on?
Just one comment, not entirely germane to the subject matter, but just in light of Zach's comment about fiber and improving internet access. If that really is something that we want to do, now's the time. The legislature is contemplating, the state legislature is contemplating that, and federally, that's also being contemplated. So if we want to get ourselves into the mix, maybe that's something that we could get into the workflow sooner rather than later.
Thank you, Sal. Any other comments? Go ahead, Kelly. Oh, okay. Well, let me end this portion of the session with just some words. Remy, thank you for sharing that, as a council, in times past, we've gotten together and we've kind of shared some personal aspects. And I think our vision statements and who and what we see our community looking like was much more personalized than we've ever done before. But I want to share with my fellow members of the council how much I appreciate each and every one of you. All the way, Chris, as you come on, you're in your 20th, well, it's not even the 20th day because 9 off of that. So you're in your 11th day of being on the council. It's good to have you on council. And I go to the other spectrum of Councilor Menke, and she's over 17 years now on the council. I learned so much from you, and I learned to appreciate each and every one of yours unique approaches. I really do. I'm excited for the next 4 years to work with you. I really am. And as we change roles and we do some things a little differently, and as we take a look at this piece right here, and try to become a better council to give better direction to our staff. Now, I shout out to Jeff and the staff. I have full confidence in the staff that is here in McMinnville. I have seen it grow. I see the expertises, I see the education, and I see the passion to be here in McMinnville of all of our employees. I talk to a lot of them. And we are so fortunate to have a staff across the board that cares about McMinnville, its citizens, and the services that we're providing. So wrapping this all up, as it talks about vision, mission, and values, we have so much to be excited about. We have, as someone said, we have a heritage and a legacy, but we want to be better than that. We don't want to take away from it. We want to be better. We want to add to that with the efforts that we put in. And so again, thank you for sharing your thoughts as it relates to the vision, and we'll be utilizing your input as we move forward. So I'll turn it back over to Wendy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I will, before I share screen again, I'm just going to say I'm really impressed with what came out of that exercise. And, you know, for a council that I've heard at times we've felt like we're divided, we really, when you get to the vision, there is so much that binds us together in our vision. And that's super heartening to see, because that really, out of that, we can create clarity of leadership for our city. So I'm really impressed with the results of what came out of that visioning. I think there's a lot of things we have to be thankful for and that we can build on. So the next step is building on that visioning exercise. As we talked about before, the way we identify what are the priorities for us to focus on now is first to identify the desired state. You guys did an excellent job of doing that. There was a lot of overlap and a lot of alignment in your thinking. And so the thing that we're going to do next is a similar exercise, but instead of trying to envision the desired state, I'm going to want for you to identify, the next step is to describe the gap. So where we are today is not yet the desired state. And there are specific things that will come to mind that tell you where we need to go next, what are the most important things that we need to work on to close the gap between what it is today and where our desired state is. And out of that is where our goals for this year should come, is that gap needs to inform our goal work. So you guys are going to have another 5 minutes. I'd like for you to write again, because then we'll have a reporting out period just like we did for the first one. And I'm taking notes on this so it can inform our work going forward. For the next 5 minutes, I'm going to set my clock. Go ahead and take the time to just write out what the gaps are between our desired state and where we are today.
Is this a 9 o'clock thing?
And then we have 2 more that will be 3 hours long as well.
Hey, did Jim Van have to do this?
Goal setting?
Huh?
Goal setting? Yeah.
For 3 hours at a time?
We only did
One session?
one session on a Saturday, and it was,
That's the way we've done it before.
Yep.
yeah, and it was, I think, like 4 or 5 hours.
It got lunch.
Yep,
That's why we done it before.
yeah.
Yep.
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 She's at 400 Southwest Taft, corner of Taft and Melrose. Sounded like it came from Albertson's or House.
on the 16th or 17th?
She didn't move because she got
Oops.
You didn't hear from me.
So she did,
Well, I
she
had
did.
seen that she wasn't living much on Facebook. I follow friends on Facebook. So.
Are they not together?
If I could work.
Oh, really? Oh, I didn't know.
Who's got the kid? Didn't they have kids?
I have kids. Not sure that I've ever seen or heard this.
I've never seen it. I don't know, I've never heard and I've never seen it, so. I'll start that rumor.
I thought there was a child. Maybe from the partner.
So that's just a temporary place right now?
Not sure.
That's not in her district, right? Or is it?
Ooh, I should check.
They have all this shit.
Yeah, go for that union shit.
They think I don't know nothing, but I know something.
No, because then we'll have to redo, she'll have to get bumped down.
I think she just has to carry it just to go back. But those wards are pretty,
They're big.
there's 2 council persons per ward.
And
So-
then the mayor,
Huh?
And then
and
there.
then the
Yeah,
mayor.
so that her ward might be,
A ward, it's like ward, there's one north and west quadrant.
I'm gonna look it up.
One's the south quadrant, one's the northeast quadrant, right? So this is the south quadrant, I'm sure. I don't know what ward it was. Can you check that out for me now? Hey Google, give me the McMinnville voting workplace. Oh,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, I do it. Basic, oh, okay. Oh, she's in the same. She was up here, and now she's down here, I think. Wait, let me look. Taft is,
Yeah, she's in Ward 3.
Taft is right below the college there.
Really?
You do that. I was looking on my map. I'm looking here on the blue and green.
Tapped in where?
Melrose?
400, yeah. On the other side. Yeah.
Nope.
She's in the blue. She's in the blue.
Maybe
She needs to move. She needs to move 2 blocks yet.
maybe she's in a friend's house, you know?
That's a good point.
Where was she at before? 16.
Okay, time's almost up, so just wrap up your last
Clearly
thoughts.
Gunshots, not loud noises, like a rifle, not a pistol.
You cannot leave Claudia here by herself. And quite frankly, it's like 3 blocks that way. I think we'd have heard too. Tell him Matt's on
Hey,
it.
I'm just telling you, I'm refreshing my CAD monitor.
All right.
Nobody else has called.
So do I have any volunteers? So what we're going to do is we're going to go around and I'm going to take notes on takeaways. Do you guys have a preference? Do you want to see my note taking or would you rather see each other's faces? Zach says faces. Okay, good. Sometimes it's helpful to see the notes if you're, but I think it's enough to hear what each other says. So in this, what we're looking for is to kind of collect a vision of what we think are the biggest gaps. If I go back to this slide, this action plan is our goals. So out of this gap that we see here, are the most important things in the gap that are going to create the 20% that produce the 80% of results should inform what makes it on our action plan, AKA goals for 2021, right? If we can move those forward and start closing that gap between our ideal vision, we can be very specific about what things will move us forward, will close that gap, then that's what should go on to our goal setting. So I will take notes on what you guys say, and we'll have that help guide our goal setting. So who wants to go first? Zach, you're first on my list. Oh wait, Remy said she'd go first. Zach, you're saved. All right, Remy, go ahead.
I'm happy to have Zach go first.
You're already unmuted, Remy, so it's easier for you.
All right. So I don't think I did the exercise correctly based on your recap at the end. What I put down is the gaps that I see in some of the work we're doing is one, communication, and I mean communication from the council to the public, communication amongst councilors, communication between staff and council, both directions, but the biggest gap there being communication between council and the public. I think that we as councilors and staff spend a lot of time responding to things that are not irrelevant, but perhaps aren't in our jurisdiction or under our control, or are things that we're already working on, but we're not communicating that message out well enough. And so it takes a tremendous amount of time because we haven't really employed effective enough communication skills. I'm typically a person that prefers just to do the work. I've never been as concerned with letting people know that I'm doing the work. I just want to do the work and get it done, but I really see the negative effects of that. I also think that with some things, and what we've done well in the past is when we've been willing to take a leap of faith with getting to where we want to be. So kind of being willing to try to jump over that gap. And oftentimes what I've seen is it just takes one person to kind of push the council in that direction. I remember an early meeting when we were having discussions with Waste Management, and Waste Management was offering all of the cities in the county, I believe it was $15,000, and Councilor Jeffries said, it was kind of touchy, but he was very, very firm that no, we did not want that money in his perspective. And he said, and in fact, I would like to see us pull out of Waste Management altogether. And that leap of faith, his ability to speak strongly, or what we've been talking about in our DEI interviews with all of our candidates, of kind of speaking truth, that leap of faith allowed us to make a huge change for the city. But it took a lot of courage to get there. I also think that there's a demand for us to understand as a body, really to understand our jurisdiction and our responsibilities. Wendy, as I said at your last council meeting, I've always admired your ability to really stick to understand and stick to the criteria and not be pulling in things from left, right, and all over the place. And unfortunately, sometimes we have to make uncomfortable decisions, but knowing that we're making the quote unquote right decision, in that we're making the decision that is responsive to the criteria. whether or not it feels like the right thing at that time. So I think that understanding then comes back to training. And I mentioned training earlier as well as something that could easily be pulled out of the strategic plan, that anything that has training involved is something that we just need to establish a timeline, and then that can, whatever is a reasonable timeline within departments or for the city council, that those things can get done. And there's a lot of different pieces of that, but I do think that, if we're, I think every counselor brought up in some way said the word equity or equitable. So therefore, if we are going to run a city that is equitable and that is delivering products that have a stamp of equity, then our entire city needs to understand how to do that. So our entire city council, department heads, and our entire city staff need DEI training to start moving us in that direction. I think ethics training for all counselors is important. I think that, I think we individually come to this role because we love our community, we want to serve our community, we want to leave our community, we want to do good and leave it in a better way. But we have to also, in that journey, we need to be open to receiving a fair amount of training, because this is a complex machine that we are being asked to push the buttons on. So those were the gaps that I saw. So they really weren't specific action items at all.
No, and they don't need to be. That's right on. What we're looking to see is where you see that we're not functioning optimally, which is perfect. Those are places where you see that if we're functioning optimally, these wouldn't be concerns. Like communication would be functioning optimally to be able to communicate to the public and with each other. And so you did great. That is right along the lines of what goes in the gap. Okay, Scott. Thank you, Remy.
Let me kind of go down my list. And I think for me, there's a couple of things. Housing, apartment prices, making our community livable, and a part of that is affordable land. Now, we have little control over that, but it ought to be a guiding principle that we can provide livability of housing, whether it be ownership, renting, or apartment. We're doing a good job on long-term facility solutions, but we need to be working today on the financing of that, what it's going to take to bring the money together to get us our long-term facility solutions together. I think understanding core services and our capacity, I want to make sure that we work within the capacity of our staff. Sometimes we're really good at delegating, but we really need to have a great partnership with our department heads and Jeff to understand what our capacity is. I think Remy hit this, but DEI, I think we need to be much more accessible to all. I think there's so many members of our community that don't feel comfortable coming to us with their problems. And I would love to see us be able to bridge that gap. Communication, I think we need to make it easier to send and receive information from our citizens. I think this last election cycle showed that we can't dictate how people communicate to us or how they're going the two-way. I think we got to get much more innovative in making it easier to communicate with our citizens. Partnerships, I think we can always grow our partnerships, and having better relationships with the county and with our nonprofit groups and our partnerships out there. We do a good job, but I think in the future we need to be doing much more from that perspective. I think we need to understand financially, I think we need to be very focused on our resources and our expenditures, and we need to hit that goal of what our contingency is as quickly as possible. I'll say I think safety is very important for police and for fire. We need to protect all of our citizens, the whole gamut, and this goes back to a bit of DEI, understanding who's in our community and how we can protect that. And I also think that there's a piece of safety is really taking a look at the process that we're going through with the fire district, and is that the best way to deliver those services, and making sure that we have adequate personnel to do what we need to do. Two other things that I think I'll touch upon, business development. And, we've got great partners out there, and I meet with them often, and it's amazing during the COVID that we're making great progress, lots of people wanting to move here. But we have to make starting running business easy in this community. And then lastly, I'm just going to talk about the planning portion of our city. Again, we need to make sure that it's easy to build. We have zoning, we have codes, we have transportation, and we have a UGB that gives us the land to do what we need to do. That was my list.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Who would like to go next? Well, and I can't see anybody. Hold on a second here.
Chris.
Oh, Chris, go ahead.
Hey, that was much quicker on the unmute there. So I didn't have a lot of items to begin with, and I tried to stay basically within the items that I had. I would say in the first several of them that I have would kind of incorporate into one thought, which is we need, and it's what we're doing now, which is we need a easy list of actionable items that we can readily communicate to our constituents that this is what our goals are, this is what we are wanting. And I think with that requirement comes a need to have clearly identified what our core services are. And I think we started doing that or have done that, but we need to clearly identify what our core services are, because it will help us to clearly identify what our priorities should be. Because one of the things that I've noticed is this kind of scattergun effect. And I feel like we're trying, like Councilor Garvin said, we're trying to be everything to everybody. And we're trying to do all of this. And if we get so scattered out there, we get nothing done. So I feel like we need to have more of a targeted approach on a specific small list that is, if I can use these terms, I don't know if it's wrong or not, but dumbed down to the lowest common denominator, so that anybody can pick up our list of goals and understand what we're talking about. It'll help all of us, including ourselves, be accountable to what we're doing. I think we really need to work on communication. I appreciate Council President Remy putting such an emphasis on the communication. I really feel that's important. We need a forward-facing, a way to give a timely forward-facing response from city leadership when there are problems or crises that we as a team should be leading the community to show how we should be acting and behaving. That's how we establish a culture. If you want a culture in your community, one of the best ways to do that is by communicating this is how we act, by demonstration and by verbiage. If we remain completely silent while things are happening that are reprehensible, then we're making a mistake. I think, and that's on one level. Then there's on the level of the priorities. If we're not having a good way to communicate with people and them with us when there's a problem, You know, I've heard one particular member who I think is on the call now of our community who's been frustrated at the lack of communication, the lack of back and forth, and feeling like they say something, but they're not heard. We need a way to make sure that that is bridged. And much like in the other area where I said we've got the scattergun approach, we've got the same thing going on in our communication. We've got Facebook pages for every department. And it's hard for the public to have a clue what's really going on within the city when they've got 15, 18, 20, I don't know how many pages we have now, but we got a bunch of them. It would be to our advantage, I think, and it's a major gap that we're missing, that we don't have something like the mayor's page, where general information about the direction of the council and the city can be put out. It's one source, one location, and when you're looking for information, something like the mayor is what you're going to look for to get that information. It seems like a gigantic gap that would help us to communicate to our constituents, or to our citizens, whichever word you want to use, if I'm being too political by saying constituents. And I think we need to be able to have, I think one of the big gaps is we don't do dinner meetings anymore. I wasn't around for dinner meetings. I wasn't a part of dinner meetings. I've only heard about dinner meetings, but as I've already said, I do much better when I can hear people's hearts and hear where people are coming from. So I think, you know, this exercise, I've been to a lot of city council meetings, and this is pretty impressive to me comparative to what I have been witnessing over the last several years. So I'd like to see us work together with more conversation, more time together, and more involvement together to build a unit, because then the other stuff that we're talking about of wanting to accomplish will naturally flow out of that. A lot of the vision, a lot of the culture, a lot of the things we want will naturally come out of that outgrowth when we come together. I hope that isn't too esoteric and not generic.
No, well, it's great. Thank you, Chris. Thank you so much. Okay, who would like to go next? Okay, Adam?
Lots of great points being made. I did try and work off my initial statement, so I don't have a ton, but you know, the main thing is I see our biggest gap is that, you know, 2 years after this strategic plan, we still haven't, I don't feel we've identified our core services. And so until we identify those, we really can't be laser focused on what regional or public-private partnerships we should be working towards to achieve these goals. And so I feel that dilutes our effectiveness. You know, there's a few analogies you could use for that. You know, I feel like we're in debt, we're making the minimum payment on every debt we have, and we're not paying down the principal on any of our goals. So I feel like we're just kind of spinning our wheels. Business friendly and, you know, empowering economic development. I feel that, and I hear repeatedly, and I have for, you know, my whole first term, is that when you're looking at McMinnville versus the county, if you're doing the same exact job, the methodology approach we use for cost recovery, although I do support that our fees were remarkably lower than what they should be for market rate, are going to that approach doesn't seem like it's accelerated the ability of builders and people that are pulling permits to get any more responsiveness in that sector. So I do hear complaints about the timeliness of the permit process, whether it's a sign permit or a housing permit or an HVAC permit or a LUC statement. I know just off direct knowledge from my own dealings with the county, you can walk in and get things stamped off and pay fees within days, where with the city we're waiting weeks. So and that's not a knock on that department. I know that their workload is heavy with the UGB and everything else they've been working on. I just think that we as council need to look at that and see, you know, if we really want business here and we want business to succeed and remove barriers, then I think we have a big gap there in how that currently is being implemented and laid out across the organization. Affordable, you know, I like what was talked about in the last meeting by Council President Drabkin about keeping some affordable housing inventory as affordable housing inventory. I know in my first term we saw a lot of affordable housing inventory get redeveloped, and I definitely am in favor of empowering our regional partners that it's in their direct purview, however that is, and however we can support them in doing that to keep affordable housing inventory on the books, because I feel keeping it in current inventory versus trying to build from the dirt up is always going to be cheaper and be a better fit for our city. You know, I feel if it comes out of the inventory, I haven't seen it go back in. I mean, we have a nice project going on out by the hospital now, but all in all, I just feel that affordable housing is kind of got gobbled up with redevelopment. So, and I'm not looking to make a regulation change on that, but I think just empowering the Housing Authority and Habitat and partners like that, YCAP, is more what I'm looking for. I don't want to create direct policy that, you know, says you can't turn an old house into an Airbnb if that's what the market demand is. But I think we can also, as a city, work with our partners to make sure subsidized and affordable housing still stays on the playing field.
Okay, great. Thank you, Councilor Garvin. That was great. Okay, who else would like to weigh in on the gap?
I'll make a few brief comments. You know, I mean, honestly, in general, I think that the management staff through the budgeting process does a really good job of prioritizing the city's core mission and the city, you know, the nuts and bolts of what the city has to do. And maybe one of the deficits that we have is having not done more work to align this strategic plan to the budget. And I suspect that the staff that were working on putting together like the individual line items in the spreadsheet and stuff probably were thinking about the budget when they were putting some of these items in. But I do think that that's to me like the most clear deficit in this process. I agreed with a lot of the comments the other councilors made, so I'm not going to repeat those. The one comment I did want to make, and this touches on tax base, housing affordability, and redevelopment of city properties downtown, is that I think there's way too many public buildings downtown. I think that has a negative impact on the city's tax base, certainly because those public buildings are not taxable. It has a negative impact on housing affordability because we could easily turn those properties, some of them, into affordable housing. And I think it's probably a more realistic approach in terms of the cost of land in this community. I mean, the reason why we don't have, you know, more affordable housing in McMinnville is not because we haven't empowered our partners or whatever. It's because the cost of land is too high and there's no inventory left. And so if that's really the priority, then the way to address that is to reduce the cost of land as low as possible. And we have these public entities. The county has a ton of properties in downtown. City's got a few properties downtown that are all in need of redevelopment. And so I think, you know, in my sort of, the one thing I wished I'd mentioned in the visioning is, you know, I think it'd be great to have a consolidated city-county services building and then basically take a lot of the properties that we have downtown and transacting them into housing and other kinds of things. And I mean, this is like a 20-year thing, but I mean, that's something that should be within our ability to accomplish, and I think is probably more realistic in terms of scaling up affordable housing in our community. So that's just a suggestion that maybe was a little tangential to the process, but hopefully helpful.
Great. Thank you, Councilor Peralta. Okay, I think Zach, Kellie, thoughts?
I don't think I've done it yet.
Okay. Okay.
Well, actually, I loved Sal's last idea, so. Okay, and I just pretty much picked up on what we're doing, but things that still need to be done is what I'm viewing as gaps.
Okay.
We need some form of fire districting situation that provides better service, more efficient service, hopefully for a reasonable amount that will provide reasonable work level for the employees too. Housing, affordable workforce housing to build equity, and housing for the homeless in some form of subsidized manner, supported in various ways, like possible credits and fees being, not assessed and things like that. And hopefully some state dollars too. Ability to accurately plan for transportation for cars, bikes, and pedestrians, etc. But we do need that planning function to look forward to a much better transportation plan in the future. Let's see, easily accessed recreation areas for all of McMinnville to enjoy that are safe and secure. Infrastructure to support the need for city management growth with the growth of the population. We're doing that and we'll continue to. Better business access through various means, such as the bypass and internet, and especially after the COVID, as we pull out of the COVID thing, and then the DEI stuff.
Okay. Okay. Just a second.
Worst for last.
Oh, it's Zach.
Yeah. Not the worst for last. What are you talking about?
Hey, don't cover my best balls, will you? I think I sufficiently buggered this one, but I'll give it my best. So gaps in that frowny face to happy face. Capacity. Just gonna always run into that one. I think Sal touched on it, but a big one on my list was sort of connectivity at council level of budget formulation, initial discussion, to budget creation, and tying all that together. I think having these policy level discussions, looking at the strategic plan as staff formulates the budget, as we formulate the budget, is going to connect. Can we do this? How are we going to pay for it? What's the we don't have all the treasure in our cave to pay for all the cool things. Capacity. How are we going to hornswoggle over what we're going to do this year? Because that's all we can afford. So I think marrying those two processes, measurability of goals is a little bit of a gap from frowny to smiley. Maybe Wendy, you will drive with me on this one, and I know this is probably the question. This is the question you're asking: is what is the path to getting to these? But to me, I can't see the path. I don't see the action items from start to finish. A lot of people find building a house daunting. I see the path. I know all the steps. I can do it, right? Same thing. So to me, it's some of these are big leaps. Like I don't know how we're gonna do that, but let's do it. So seeing the path. Ones I added as I listened was I think seconding the communication to the public, and I can summarize my thoughts and feelings by what a mentor once told me is, if you don't communicate it, you didn't do it. And so, talking about what we're doing. I also was asked by Susan, got the pleasure to write a little blurb about MacPac in the Parks and Rec guide, the thing I've been reading for a million years as a kid growing up, and I got the chance to write the little story on the back, which was really cool. And it wasn't very much, but just writing those things, putting communication out there, right? And playing offense in our communication, not defense. And I hate sports analogies, but just talking about cool stuff as it comes up, make a cycle of here's the days we're going to talk about stuff, and here's who's going to talk about here's whose turn it is. Here's the cycle, and every month we're going to write an essay and put a viewpoints out, or here we're going to just write an essay and put it down in a publication, and just talk about cool stuff going on. Just create, lead the culture, right? We're just going to talk about all this stuff, and we'll be more comfortable with issuing those statements when it comes to the squishy, yucky, bad stuff that we need to address and talk about and not shy away from, but just a sense of commonly communicating. So I think both the communication in, if you don't communicate it, you didn't do it type of thing. So coming up with a easy resource so that people don't have to just constantly read the top of the scroll feeder thingy-majiggy, but can go to here's our communication page on the website, here's what we're talking about. And also just sort of a cycle of, writing essays, writing publications, writing blurbs, and all our stuff to talk about cool stuff.
Great. Awesome. All right. And I think we got everybody. There's nobody that we missed, right? No. Awesome. Okay, well, thank you, everybody. Very thorough. We are going to follow up on this by organizing your thoughts out of that exercise, and it will be incorporated in the support for the goal setting. So the learnings that we had here will help us to really narrow in on some goals for this year that will help to address those gaps that we see. You guys see my screen? Yeah? Good. All right, great. So the next step is actually part of the feedback we heard is that homework was overwhelming. We have an approach for narrowing down our strategic plan objectives that we are going to evaluate for potential inclusion in our goal work for this year. And Susan's going to go over what we're going to do with regards to that. Okay, so Susan, I'll stop screen share so that you can do your screen share.
Okay, thank you. Hi, everybody. Hopefully you're looking at a purple and white page with some words on it. After the meeting tonight, you're going to get an email from me with a link to this in it. And this is designed to be an easier tool, and we're interested in your feedback on this, but this is designed to be an easier tool to start doing that narrowing that Wendy has been talking about throughout the evening tonight. So Scott Burke and I did this survey that we're going to email out to you. Everything that is on here is strategic plan objectives. So in looking at the spreadsheet that you all had, you were down in the strategic plan action priorities, and we're going to survey you about one level higher about, which is the strategic plan objectives. So when you get the link from me, you're just going to go in there and put your email address in. These are going to be trackable to who voted on what, and that's something that we need to do. So you'll just go through all of these and decide what your top 7, based on that gap analysis that you just did, which 7 of these objectives will help us fill that gap in. So you'll go through and click all 7, whatever you would like to click. And then at the end, you're going to click the submit button at the bottom. Make sure you do that. What will happen then is you will get an email that shows you what you voted on. And because we are making it safe to change your mind, at the bottom of that email, there is a link where you can go back in here and edit things. So if you vote for your 7 and then you get the email and you look at them the next day and you think, you know what, I don't like that one anymore, I want to vote for another one, you can go back in and change your vote on that. So hopefully that seems like an easier process for doing the homework. And I'm going to stop sharing. We need to find out from you all what a reasonable timeline is to do the voting in this method through a link online. So it's important to think about capturing your thoughts now quickly after you've done that gap analysis, but we also want to make sure that you have enough time to think about it and give us enough time to narrow down the results so that we can bring that back at your next work session. So we're looking for, yeah. Mayor, do you have a timeline that would be reasonable?
Well, I have a question. You know, we're talking about the gaps, and I think we've had some really good dialogue on that, and Wendy captured it. Is that capturing of our gaps going to come out so that we can be cognizant of everyone in the group as we're trying to build consensus and aligning ourselves?
Do you mean, is that the gap's going to come out before you vote on your top 7? I can, it probably won't be organized. I'm going to be doing some kind of organizing and kind of grouping of it. I won't be able to do that before we get that voting, but I will send out my raw notes for sure.
That's what I was thinking, just a raw note to help us keep together as a, I mean, we've had some great interaction and we only have our own personal notes, but to have that might be somewhat helpful to me.
Is it just the that one page? It's that one page survey?
It is. So there are 27 items that you need to look through and then narrow them down to 7, and it's just this one list here.
I feel like that's reasonable by Monday. It gives us the weekend to do it, get through the rest of our work weeks, etc., and council work. And anybody else have a different date that would feel more comfortable to them?
No, but I have a question and a comment. And the comment, I think, just got made even more evident. I think we've lost Wendy. She froze solid, and now she's disappeared. So that was the comment. The question is, I'm one of these people that kind of tries to look forward and second guess what's going to happen. And so what's as I read what we're doing, the next step is you guys are going to do a vote tally, and the top so many are going to become our objectives. Am I reading the direction we're heading correctly?
Yeah, this is part, and Wendy could say this much better than I, so if she pops on, she can correct this, but the idea is narrowing the scope of what you're going to be going into details on before you go into the details. And we kind of based on your feedback, we realized we had those sort of flipped based on your last homework. So now you'll be narrowing it down so we can do more work on your top 7 priorities. Instead of doing the work on the whole plan, which you all have done such a good job of articulating what that's like to work with the whole plan, we'll be looking at narrowing that down and then digging a little deeper into each of those.
And welcome back. When you say we are going to be narrowing it down, what is the targeted number that we're going to be narrowing down to?
And Wendy probably has an idea here. We wanted you to vote on 7, but she may have some more ideas about how much more she'd like.
Right. So we haven't done that work yet, which is why we were hoping that you guys would then give us your votes of 7. We want to see where there's alignment, right? So what we're trying to do is we're trying to get it down to where we can actually do the work of extracting goals out of these that are in alignment with what you guys feel like we should be working with, and that we can make sure we then have the work to make them specific, right? And measurable and attainable and realistic and time coupled. So we will know that more after we get your feedback back, we process the gap exercise, and then we're going to look at how we can make that more attainable for you guys. So there will be another step of homework before we have you work on this more. We're going to try to make sure you have plenty of time and plenty of support to do it, and that there's much less quantity, but it'll be in preparation for doing that additional work to then narrow down to then identify which ones are going to become goals, and then we work to make them specific. So I'll know that.
I'm sorry. So this step is then really you're trying to find our commonalities for us.
Yes. And then, but it might not narrow it all the way down. So we are going to have another step where you're going to have process work to do before we go into the next work session after you vote on this 7.
And then, Wendy, while you were gone, Chris was asking a question. As we move to that other column at a higher level, that's more at a policy and procedure level as compared to a implementation level, which that's what we were looking at. And so we're backing out a little bit so that we can look at the level where we can make policy and procedure where the council needs to be involved, and not in the nitty gritty things that made up that 160 list.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Chris.
No, you first.
Oh, I was just going to say, it may be that in evaluating all the feedback you guys have given us so far, and evaluating your votes and evaluating the gaps, that we stay at that level and just narrow down that level and then extract what goals we would like to achieve within that objectives level instead of going to the priority level. We may decide to do that. We're going to collect the data first and then come up with what we think will make it the most successful process for the city council.
So to be openly transparent about the reason why I'm asking these questions is I'm trying to figure out whether I even want to know, I want to even look at your gathering of everybody else's information, or whether I want to mark my 7 in a vacuum.
Without it. Right.
And so I'm trying to evaluate what it is you're trying to do. And it sounds to me like I'd almost be better to evaluate it in a vacuum, because you are intending to then take the results of each 7 of us and gel that into where our commonalities are. So if I'm trying to second guess where everybody else wants to be, then I may end up not really providing where our commonalities are. Am I making sense?
Yeah, I totally get what you're saying with that. But what I would say is, I don't mind if your opinion or your viewpoint is influenced by the viewpoint of others. That actually makes our job easier, because it means that we've already taken the step towards alignment around priorities. Okay. Right? And so this exercise has shown that there is some significant amount of alignment in what the councilors think is important. The more overlap there is in that top 7, the easier it's going to be for us to be narrowed in and then to make some specific goals that's going to move us forward, right? So I don't mind if you read over everything that everybody else said and you filter it through your perspective of what's best for the city. That actually will get us closer, I think, than trying to stay uninfluenced by what the other councilors think. Really, in the end, we have to be united around a set of goals that we think is what's best for the city, or that you guys think is what's best for the city, and then me as a citizen. Go ahead, Jeff.
So a couple of things, Councilor Chenoweth, I think we'll provide those raw notes to you, and I think it's up to each of you to decide if you want to reflect on those before you rank your top 7. Part of the reason we're going through this exercise is to really sort of try to narrow the field. And so the best case scenario is that if all 7 of you vote for the same 7 priorities, it's going to be pretty clear where the council wants to go. And the worst case scenario is if all 27 priorities get 1.8 votes. And it won't happen that way, because that's not the way you're splitting it up. But when you go through these sort of exercises, if we were in a room together, we do what's called a dot exercise, and you'd all have a bunch of dots and you'd put them on the pieces of white paper, and then we'd look at them and say, well, here's the most, here's the next most, here's the next most. And there's almost always some sort of a natural break where some things aren't going to get any votes at all, or maybe not very many. There's going to be 3 or 4 or 5 that get 5 or 6 or 7 votes, and those sort of seem to gravitate to the top. But until we see the data and how it mixes out, we can't really tell you. We don't have a preconceived notion as a leadership team that it's 1, 2, or 7 priorities that we're looking for. We're just trying to see where the current consensus of the council is. And then you're going to talk about what that means and why you picked the ones you wanted and why you didn't. And hey, Zach makes a compelling argument for this thing that I didn't think of, and now I want to move my dot. So it's going to be sort of an iterative process for you.
May I add that having done these dot exercises in committee meetings and et cetera, that the seeing what other people do is beneficial, as well as having conversation with people when you see them making those selections. It can be quite beneficial. And so I think with that, I'd love to get Amanda's opinion on the conversation between counselors. If counselors would like to discuss this with other counselors, should we be, Kristen and I talked about this the other day, should we be wary of consecutive meeting laws?
So before I let Amanda answer, that's a great question, but we're also, that's one of the reasons we're tracking your responses. When we bring everything together, you're gonna know who said what, and you'll get the chance as a group to sort of talk through that next time as well. So now I'll let Amanda answer the technical question.
Yeah, I was going to say that is a very real concern and something that I would recommend against doing. And even in public meetings where we can all meet together doing where you're like placing dots, if you're having conversations away from microphones where people can't hear what you're saying, that's also not necessarily appropriate. It should be something that can be heard by the public. So I would discourage, multiple different conversations happening outside of a public meeting on this topic, particularly because this will inform decisions that the council is going to be making later on.
Thank you.
And Remy, to address that, we'll make sure that there's conversation that can happen around why in the next work session around why people voted for what. When we're thinking about how what additional homework we might need for you to do, we will include discussion of what was done to help you guys to understand each other in the next work session.
So this kind of goes back to what Director Muir was talking about with it being a document that we can go back and edit. The example was 24 hours later, but I think that what I'm thinking about is that conversation happens and all of a sudden I'm seeing a perspective from Councilor Peralta that I hadn't considered before, and it causes me to reprioritize. So I just want to be mindful of that as we go through this, that those conversations can and should be influential in our decision-making process.
Yeah, great. We'll incorporate that in the exercise when we get back together so that things can be fluid.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Susan about that exercise? So I'm gonna, I don't think I need to, okay, I guess I will share this slide. Oops. Oh, sorry, Claudia. I'm no longer a part of the, I'm no longer a co-host. I can't share my slides anymore. Okay, I can just explain this, it's fine. It's not a lot of information on the slide. So the next steps are, as Susan described, we're going to have you do the rating of 7. We're going to be processing all the input we've gotten to date, and then we are going to give you some prep work for the next work session. So I was going to go through and do an example of the homework that we had given, but to be honest, as I was working through this, I would rather restructure the homework first, because we're going to make some changes based on everything we've heard tonight, everything I've talked to you guys individually about, and I don't want to necessarily go through something that isn't necessarily going to be helpful. What I am going to do is when we send out the homework, I'll follow up with you guys individually to make sure that if you have any questions for me, if you want to walk through it, we're going to make it more attainable based on your feedback from the first homework. And obviously, we're going to be narrowing it down. So I'll just be more proactive to make sure that everybody understands and feels comfortable with what the homework is once we get it pulled together. So there will be 2. There's that Susan's voting exercise, and then a packet well before the next work session that will contain some additional preparation work. Does that make sense? Okay.
Wendy, can I add sort of 2 things? If you have technical questions about the process, you can always talk to Wendy. She's your consultant. Any of you can reach out to her about process pieces. If you've got specific questions about the information in the strategic plan and sort of want a refresher, what does this mean? What was the background? Feel free to reach out to me. You can always have those conversations with staff as well. And then you'll, as a group, be able to share your perspectives and ask, have that exchange of information between one another that is going to be important as well.
Great. So, have any questions for me before I hand it back over to Mr. Mayor to close up the meeting, the work session? Okay, well, thank you, everybody. I mean, I'll say I said I was in, oh, go ahead.
It's not a question. It's not a question, just okay. A comment. I just wanted to get in my thank yous, mind my manners. I've done so much talking, I haven't done that. So thank you to all those who put this together. Thank you for the time that's been spent on this. You guys did an excellent job. I appreciate it greatly. Thank you very, very much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Councilor Chenoweth. And I was gonna say the same thing actually, because really what made it such a success was what you guys contributed to it. Your brainstorming and thoughts and conversation make me really excited to keep going on this process. I think we're going to create some amazing results. And so it's just been really an enjoyable evening, and I'm super excited to process the data and prep us for another successful work session at the next one. So thank you very much for your participation. I appreciate it. Mr. Mayor?
Well, thank you, Wendy. Again, your insight and your utilization of the tools within your business, you become an expert at delivering this. But again, the big piece is that, this has not been used for municipalities before. And so it is truly a learning curve for all of us as we navigate using the principles of EOS and utilizing it in a municipal setting. I'd just like to thank each of the councilors this evening of taking time, and there's many of us that have really had a busy day with a lot of city business going on, but taking this time, it's getting us to where we need to go. Jeff and staff, thank you for your preparation. Thank you for being a part of the process that's going to really give us directions for the future. And as we have our vision aligned with where we need to be going, I think it's going to be very critical. So with that being said, any comments from councilors for the good of the order this evening? Go ahead, Adam.
I'd again just like to extend my thanks to everybody on the Zoom tonight. I think this was probably one of the most productive work sessions we've had in recent memory. So thank you for leading the way, Wendy, and I look forward to us drilling down on this stuff and getting some things that we can be held accountable to.
Well, thanks, everyone. I will go ahead and adjourn the meeting this evening. Again, thank you and have a safe evening, and we'll see you later.